1. The Templars began as a small group of knights, not as a powerful organization from the start. The Order of the Templars was born after the success of the First Crusade, when Crusader states were established in the Holy Land, but pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem were still exposed to Napadenia and bandit attacks. Around 1119 or 1120, 8 or 9 French knights led by Jacques de Molay decided to devote themselves to protecting those pilgrims. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem gave them quarters in a wing of the royal palace, located on ground identified with the former Temple of Solomon. That is where their name came from, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. At first, they were a very small organization and functioned more like a religious brotherhood of warriors than a great international institution. Their original purpose was not to build a financial empire, but to guard roads and protect pilgrims in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Over time, that modest group began to grow thanks to the support of powerful patrons and the church. One of the most surprising things about their history is that one of the most famous organizations of the Middle Ages began with only a handful of men. And the Templars were one of the most unusual ideas of the Middle Ages because they combined monastic life with warfare. In medieval Europe, there was a clear tension between the ideal of the monk and the ideal of the knight. The Templars brought those two worlds together inside a single institution. They received official recognition at the Council of Troyes in 1128, which gave the order church legitimacy and allowed it to expand quickly. Bernard of Clairvaux, one of the most influential religious authorities of the age, wrote a defense of this new knighthood, and that greatly increased the order's prestige. Because of that, the Templars were no longer seen merely as warriors, but as men serving God with the sword, as well as with prayer. This made them the model of a new type of military order that later inspired other similar institutions. Their success came not only from military strength, but also from the fact that the church accepted and sanctified their unusual role. In practice, the Templars showed that in the age of the Crusades, it was possible to be at once a monk, a soldier, and part of an international religious institution. Inside the order, there was strict discipline and a clearly defined hierarchy. The Templars were not a loose band of armed knights, but a highly organized institution with its own offices, ranks, and internal rule. At the top stood the Grand Master, and below him were knights, chaplains, sergeants, craftsmen, commanders, and other officials of the order. The order also had its own clergy, much of which operated outside ordinary diocesan control. The knights took vows similar to monastic vows, and their daily lives were regulated by rules concerning clothing, food, prayer, and discipline. Historical sources emphasize that their diet and dress were supposed to be simple, and their lifestyle, at least in theory, was meant to be far from luxury. The characteristic clothing of a Templar knight was the white mantle marked with a red cross, one of the most recognizable symbols of the Middle Ages. This is important because people often imagine them only as warriors, while in reality they were part of a strict and almost corporate religious structure. Their strength came precisely from that combination of monastic discipline, military hierarchy, and international reach. The Templars were an elite military force of the Crusades, but they were not invincible. In the 12th century, the order gained a strong position throughout the Latin Christian states in the East. The Templars became one of the pillars of the armed Christian presence in the Holy Land. They took part in military operations, defended fortresses, and supported Crusader campaigns not only in Palestine, but also in Spain and other regions where Christians were fighting Muslim powers. Their role became so important that for a long time, the history of the order almost overlapped with the history of the Crusades themselves. At the same time, they were far from unbeatable and suffered heavy losses in battle, especially as the position of the Crusader states began to weaken. After the fall of Acre in 1291, which marked the final collapse of the Latin Christian presence in the Holy Land, the Templars lost the main field of action for which they had originally been created. That was a turning point, because an order founded to defend the Christian East suddenly had to exist without its central mission. That crisis of purpose partly explains why it later became such an easy target for political attack. The Templars became famous not only as warriors, but also as masters of medieval finance. As the order expanded, its houses and fortresses began to function as safe places for storing money and valuables. Thanks to their widely spread network of properties, the Templars became important intermediaries between East and West. Historians have even described them as a great commercial and financial corporation of the Middle Ages. Nobles and pilgrims could deposit wealth with them and later retrieve it in another location. which resembled an early form of banking service. The order also handled loans and money transfers, further increasing its influence. This financial skill helped the Templars accumulate great wealth and enormous prestige. At the same time, their economic success began to arouse envy and suspicion, especially among rulers who were deeply in debt to them. In practice, their money and logistical network were probably just as important to their power as their swords and castles. Templar power rested on a vast network of estates and commanderies across Europe. The order was not limited to the Holy Land, but owned property spread throughout the Christian West. In different countries, it possessed commanderies, land, houses, churches, storehouses, and agricultural infrastructure that supported military activity in the East. Thanks to this, it could recruit men, gather revenue, and manage resources on a trans-regional scale. In the 12th century, the order gained a lasting foothold in nearly all Latin Christian lands. Such a network gave it enormous independence and the ability to move money, people, and information quickly. On the other hand, that same reach and relative autonomy increasingly provoked suspicion. The Templars were rich, well-organized, and primarily answerable to the Pope, which in the eyes of many monarchs made them too powerful. The more the order resembled an international state within a state, the easier it became to portray it as politically dangerous. The fall of the Templars was driven largely by politics, debt, and forced confessions. When the order reached the height of its power, its success awakened the greed and hostility of King Philip IV of France. Philip, who had a strong interest in weakening the order and gaining access to its wealth, began to move against the Templars. In 1307, mass arrests of Templars took place across France, and among those detained was the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. During the investigations, torture was used, and many of the accused confessed to absurd and extreme charges, including blasphemy, trampling on the cross, and the worship of mysterious idols. Many historians emphasize that these forced confessions created the later image of the Templars as a dark and heretical organization. The trials dragged on for years and were shaped by a power struggle between the French king and the papacy over control of both the case and the order's property. In practice, the Templars became the victims of political calculation, financial temptation, and the logic of medieval inquisitorial procedure. That is why their destruction still feels more like a political operation than a purely religious trial. The order was officially dissolved, but its end was a process, not a single moment. After the arrests and investigations, Pope Clement V formally dissolved the Order of the Templars in 1312. That did not mean an immediate and uniform end for every person and structure connected to the order. In different countries, the fate of the Templars varied because rulers and clergy did not treat them with the same hostility everywhere as they did in France. The most famous symbolic finale of the order's story was the burning of Jacques de Molay in 1314. It was the death of the last Grand Master that gave the whole story its lasting aura of martyrdom and mystery. From that point on, the Templars ceased to exist as a real political and military force, but they began a second life in memory, legend, and later storytelling. Their actual order disappeared, but their symbolic presence only truly began at that moment. In that sense, the Templars lost as an institution, but survived as one of the greatest myths of medieval Europe. In Portugal, the Templar legacy did not disappear. It was transformed. One of the most fascinating exceptions in Templar history is Portugal. There, the Templar legacy was not completely destroyed, but passed into a new institution known as the Order of Christ. The monastery and castle at Tomar had already been linked to the Templars since the 12th century, and later became the headquarters of the new order. The site was founded in 1160 by Gualdim Pais, the Templar Grand Master in Portugal. In the 14th century, the entire complex was taken over by the new order, which preserved part of the organizational and symbolic continuity of the Templars. This is important because it shows that the fate of the order did not end everywhere in total erasure. In Portugal, the former Templar center later came to play a role in the age of great maritime discoveries. In other words, in some countries, the Templars did not simply vanish, they were reshaped into a new form. The greatest legend of the Templars was born only after their downfall. Today, the Templars are associated with hidden treasure, the Holy Grail, Baphomet, secret knowledge, and mysterious rituals. In reality, many of those famous stories grew much stronger only long after the order itself had been dissolved. Even during the medieval trials, fantastic accusations appeared about idols, blasphemy, and secret ceremonies, but many of those claims were tied to torture, rumor, and a climate of sensationalism. Later literature, esotericism, and popular culture pushed the Templars even further away from their historical reality. As a result, the real military religious order became covered by the image of an almost magical organization full of secrets. Historically, the Templars were indeed powerful, and they were surrounded by an aura of exclusivity. But that does not mean all later legends have solid documentary foundations. Their myth is so strong precisely because it combines real power, a brutal downfall, and gaps in the sources with the imagination of later centuries. It is one of the best examples of how medieval history can turn, in mass culture, into an almost endless generator of mystery.